Hi there. I'll put on my non-reflecting glasses as I normally do here. Now, let's get down to Pimsleur. I discussed Pimsleur. Oh, my blue snowball again. I discussed Pimsleur, the sort of very kind of snake oil salesman approach they had to selling their product. Someone pointed out that all the different companies do this, and of course that's true. And I looked at some of the books that I have, and as you can see, like that's only a small number of the books that I have, but they all promise, if I grab any one of them here, teach yourself, learn to speak. This is their beginner book. You can't really see me here. This is their beginner book, and this is quite typical of all of them. They promise, learn to speak, understand, and write Russian. Progress quickly beyond the basics. Explore the language in depth. None of this is true. You only really get started with this book. And there are other books like that. Hugo I have, and others, and they promise that, what is this? Hugo's Czech here. I had this kicking around from before. In 3 months, Czech in 3 months. Blah, blah, blah. This is doesn't quite promise you, it just says you'll learn it fast. That's fair enough. But the point is, you in fact learn very little. They say in each chapter, in this chapter you will learn to master the subjunctive, or you will learn to master this other thing. In fact, you don't, because the process of learning the language is such a gradual process, and when these different concepts and vocabulary items kick in is anybody's guess, has been my experience. It certainly doesn't happen on cue after 10 days or 3 months or anything like that. But getting back to Pimsleur, the thing about language learning to me is that it takes a long time. If I look at, I was just looking at, for example, I've been at Czech now, I figure, with my travels to China and elsewhere and that, I think I probably spent over 100 hours on it. Now, after 100 hours, I can read a fair number of newspaper articles. I'll typically import them into links so that I can look up words that I don't know, but I know enough words to basically pick my way through them even without link. I am reading that history book of mine where I basically don't bother looking up words because it's too much trouble, and I can understand the meaning, and it's very interesting. So I'm reading an adult level book in Czech after 100 hours. If I had used Pimsleur, I wouldn't be doing that. Now, it's possible that I would be speaking more on a limited range of things, but I can't see myself spending hundreds of hours. Like I took out my Pimsleur Russian, and there's a sort of a simple dialogue there. There's like 8 CDs, and it never gets past this idea of this guy trying to invite this girl for a drink, and there's no text to read, and the words that repeat are some of the things that in many cases are difficult to remember, like numbers. Like, I never worry about numbers because I know that numbers are going to take me a long, long time, and it really doesn't matter. So that, it's a tremendously, for me, time-consuming way of acquiring vocabulary. And for me, the big thing in learning languages is acquiring vocabulary, because I want to understand. I want to understand what I read. I want to understand what I hear. So I'm close to understanding the Czech radio now when I listen to it. It helps if I know the subject. It obviously helps a lot if the subject is, the dispute in the Czech cabinet over the restitution of church lands or something that there have been 4 or 5 different articles on. If I hear something about it, I understand what they're talking about very well. If it's a new subject that I'm not very interested in, it's a lot more difficult. But still, I feel that my 100 hours invested in Czech that's a good return, because I can listen and read to to an extent. The other thing I don't like about Pimsleur is, one of my objections to traditional language teaching is that the teacher, or in the case of Pimsleur, decides what you're going to learn. They decide which phrases are important to you. I prefer to pick the words and phrases that I want. Also, Pimsleur puts you on the spot. They force you to respond. They force you to say something now. I don't want to do that. I'm quite happy. But I should say right off the bat that a lot of people love Pimsleur. So it's very much a matter of what you like to do. And because language learning takes so much time, like I was calculating that in Russian over the last 5 years, I've probably spent 1,500 hours with the Russian language, listening, reading, or reviewing words, or whatever I've been doing, speaking. At least 1,500 hours, maybe closer to 2,000 hours. I couldn't spend that time doing stuff that I found uninteresting. So I find Pimsleur uninteresting. The content is uninteresting. Being forced to say things is uninteresting. Them deciding what I'm supposed to say and when, I don't like doing. So I prefer doing things that I enjoy because I have to spend so much time doing it. With Chinese, it didn't take me 5 years. It took me 10 months, essentially, 9 or 10 months, but I was working 7 to 10 hours a day. So I was getting, I had over 3,000 hours of input to Chinese, but that was, again, reading, speaking, listening, the things that I like to do. So I'm prepared to put the time in doing it. If it's some kind of a brain dead, bark now kind of thing, I don't think I'd keep at it. So my big thing with Pimsleur is that for some people, it gets them started. I don't need it to get me started, but I don't think I would spend a lot of time at it. But I accept that other people do and other people enjoy it. So yeah, that's the thing. I think to some extent, as long as we're able to spend time with the language, to some extent it really doesn't matter what we do. And what perhaps is more important is what our goals are and what we like to do, and that'll determine the kind of language learning activity that is effective for us. Thank you for listening.